Well, hello and welcome. Today we'll be doing future-proofing your library. My name is Christopher Holly. I'm one of the directors of Software as a Service Innovation here at EBSCO. And joining me today are three panelists, and I'll have them introduce themselves shortly. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what we'll be covering today in future-proofing your library. It can cover such a gamut of things, and today we plan to explore a lot of the complex challenges of planning, adapting, and changing in various areas within libraries. So joining me today are three panelists covering a range of institutions to hopefully provide you all with some good perspective around this. I'll have them introduce themselves and their institution first, and then after that, we'll explore these themes through a series of questions. Stephanie, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Christopher, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I enjoy being able to have this conversation with you and Jeff and Lucy, and look forward to what we have to say. I'm Dean of Educational Resources, as well as the Director of Maslin Library here at Cairn University. We are a small institution. We have fewer than 1,000 FTE for our student population. However, with our head count, we're actually at the highest we've ever been. So we serve a lot of people between faculty, students, staff, alumni, as well as our community members. And serving that large group, or small large group to us, is a small team of 3 librarians. And then we have a couple GAs, and we have our student workers that we rely on. And we as a group are committed to curating a growing print and e-collection. I think that's always important to remember. We don't stay stagnant even in our collections, and we put a lot of value in our print as well. So our print is still a small one at about 150,000 and growing items. And then our e-content is always growing. And so we have about 1 million or more ebooks, a good solid e-journal collection, as well as those squirrely streaming media items that are very hard to count. We were asked to kind of talk about what our key systems that we're using. And when I think about that, obviously it has to be our library system, and that's EBSCO FOLIO for us. And then Discovery, I put a lot of things in Discovery, and we can have a debate about that if we want. But we think of Discovery as EDS and Locate, but also Bibliograph and Third Iron, and even our website we can fall in, we kind of put into the Discovery. For consortia, our lending and borrowing, we do mainly through Reshare with Palsy for our returnables. And then we use WorldShare ILL and Rapid ILL. And our WorldShare contract ends in the end of June 2026, just saying. And our authentication is Open Athens, which we've had since 2017. That's been a key feature for us for a very long time, and we're very grateful for it. And then our current initiatives of how, for us, what we're focusing on. One is Stacks, which we've had for a very long time, but when we moved to Folio, we lost some integration. And in the next weeks and months, we're working on bringing that back to where we were with added integration because of Folio. And then, which I always feel like this is the next thing, what we always have our eye on when we're a Folio, is the next release. So in particular, we're really looking forward to getting that integration with Mosaic for our e-content purchasing. We are an alpha tester, and it is phenomenal, and we can't wait to be able to get to do that real time. And then for our bibliograph, which is a wonderful tool, and we want to keep working on our workflow. We want to keep refining, figuring out how to train more staff on how to use it to build collections so that we can get that out to our patrons, our customers, our community, and that we can use it in many different places, as well as using it for collection development. And then finally, the library assessment piece, and it's kind of out there with our talk, but I do think it's something we want to focus on, and I'm looking at, because we have to be willing to revamp our reporting to align with some of the changes with the accreditors, where, for example, MSCHE, there's one reference to information literacy there. Well, what does that mean for the value of the library today? And how can we change what we're reporting on or report better on and demonstrate better through our KPIs and other things for the library's value for our leaders? And I think those are all really important pieces here. And I hope that I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. On to Lucy.
Hello, everybody. I am Lucy Harrison. I'm an Associate Vice Chancellor within the University System of Georgia Board of Regents. But more importantly for this conversation, I'm the Executive Director of GALILEO. GALILEO is a consortia of libraries exclusively in Georgia. We serve over 2,000 institutions, but some we serve differently than others. We have libraries from K-12, public libraries, all the way up through higher ed. Our mission is supporting lifelong learning for all Georgians. So for all of our institutions, we provide e-content, licensing, as well as open access agreements. And for all of our institutions, we have EDS, both as a backend database and as a discovery interface. We also have developed in-house a bento search that relies on APIs from EBSCO and others, as well as APIs to our to other systems that we have. And like Stephanie, we have Open Athens. We've had Open Athens for since about the same time, probably since about 2017, actually. And like I said, we do some things differently for other audiences. So for the University System of Georgia libraries specifically, we also manage their library systems. So we are currently, as I speak, we are currently on ALMA. We are migrating to FOLIO and OpenRS. And by the time folks actually watch this presentation, we will have completed our testing and made a final go live decision. As things stand right now, we are planning to go live on FOLIO and OpenRS in mid-December. We also provide some other programs like the Digital Library of Georgia, and we have an affordable learning program that provides grants for open access textbooks and free and low-cost textbooks. Current library initiatives, as I mentioned, we are migrating to FOLIO and OpenRS for the university system. We are also working on a redesign of our bento search interface, specifically for our K-12 audiences, and looking at our statistics and how those are changing and perhaps being impacted by some of the initiatives that Christopher already mentioned. We are rethinking our approach to those, both on the back end and how we gather them, and what is most important to us moving forward. I didn't mention our staff. We are a small team. We have about 30 folks who are working to support GALILEO across the state, some here at the system office and some at the University of Georgia.
All right, thanks, Lucy. And on to Jeff.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Daniels. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at Grand Valley State University. Grand Valley State University has about 22,000 students. We're a public liberal arts college in Southwest Michigan. Our classifications are professions focused, undergraduate, graduate, and large medium institution. We work with EBSCO to host FOLIO for our library management system. We have EBSCO Discovery Services for discovery, including Locate. We use that as a card catalog. And we also use EBSCO for the backend e-resource management. Currently, the initiatives I'm focusing on at the library are enhancing the research accessibility and usability for all users. I think one of the ways that we can future-proof our libraries is to demonstrate return on investment to the university. And one of the ways we can do that is being instrumental in the research both our students and our faculty are accomplishing. And then also everybody's very favorite thing who works in academia, we're working on our next 5-year strategic plan. And unfortunately, that will include a planned reduction in our collection spend.
Great. Well, thank you all for the introductions. I hope that gives everyone a chance to get a better sense of your institutions, your own background, and helps inform a lively discussion this afternoon. So I'm going to kick this off with a couple of questions, and we'll take the discussion from there. So to start off, how do each of you define future-proofing? It can be kind of a buzzword out there, so I'm just sort of curious how each of you might define it in the context of your own work. Is it about technology, workflows, staffing, something else entirely? And we'll kick it off with Stephanie.
So I would say yes, 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 yes to all of those, right? I mean, I think it's everything, but I do think one thing that's really important is to adding in the relevancy and value. And for all of our initiatives and everything that we want to do, it's making sure we're relevant to our people, our constituencies, and also value. Like, what do we bring to people? And then how do we share that? And so at the heart of future-proofing to us, it means to be remaining useful, resilient, and successful. And what I look at as future-proofing in a lot of ways is going to be different, obviously, than GALILEO and GVSU. But I also think we have these common threads that I'm excited to be able to look at. And for us, everything that we do at Cairn, we've gotten into a habit of asking the question, is it missional, is it manageable, and is it sustainable? And so I think in some ways, because of that, we've subconsciously already baked in future-proofing for us because we're asking those questions from the start. And for us, it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, is being willing to ask, is this working? And even if it is, are there tweaks to our current tools, resources, and or workflows that are a better fit? And we can't have it all. I mean, let's go back to the fiscal issues. We all have constraints. We can't have it all. And so in terms of sustainability, we have to ask that fiscal question as well as the human resource question, because we're all struggling with staff too. And if we add something new, reality is we can't just add something new. Something has to be taken away. So how are you able to ask those questions, or how are you going to answer that? And then asking those hard questions of, is there a better way to facilitate ILL? Is there a better way to get your metadata and manage your metadata? Like asking those questions and being willing to hear answers that may not be exactly what you want to hear.
And I'll add to that. For me, we are going through some things right now that feel seismic, that feel like they are, changing the world in significant ways. But, there are times in the past that we have gone through similar upheavals. I graduated library school in the, early 90s. I think it was my last semester of library school when the first web browser came out, the first graphical web browser came out. And, a lot of what I had just learned over the previous 3 semesters was suddenly out the window. Dialogue was not really a thing anymore. But that didn't make my education irrelevant. I had learned things that I was able to translate to the new environment. So what I think is core for us as an organization to manage this change at GALILEO is resilience, adaptability, and agility, while remaining true to our core values, right? And I don't mean like societal core values. I mean, what is our value as a consortia to the state of Georgia? And if we can do that, we should be able to weather whatever gets thrown at us.
I love what Stephanie was saying about missionable, manageable, sustainable. And then you're kind of taking it to that personal level of what does it mean to me. And then I also like what Lucy said, and I think this also ties in with both in their own way. How can I translate that? So I think that's a great way to think about it for ourselves. It's like, okay, how am I going to adapt to the situation? How can I translate what I know? I think there are all that sort of looming. Is artificial intelligence going to overtake us or somehow replace my job or something like that? I don't think that's the case, but I do think it's important for us to be proactive about what it means to me, how I translate that, how does this fit in with what I'm doing to our mission as an organization. So yeah, I think you all made some really salient points there that make a lot of sense. Moving along, when you think about future-proofing your library, what external forces, like I mentioned artificial intelligence already, we could bring that into the picture again, AI. We talked a little bit about funding shifts in some of the comments already, but if we look at sort of technology like AI, funding shifts, policy changes, what of those kinds of things are top of mind for you right now? And I'll start off with Jeff in this case.
Well, you mentioned funding. We've all, I think, mentioned funding at one point in our answers. And so I won't belabor the point, but our budgets, we're lucky if we get a flat budget year to year at the library. Unfortunately, it's often cuts. But at the same time, our books, our software, our databases, our journals, they're going up at a 3 to 5 to 7% every year. And long term, that math just doesn't add up. So funding is a real concern for us. But one of the things that we're talking about here today is new initiatives. And that's a thing that we're focusing on quite a bit on my team. How do we have the ability to support new initiatives long term in a sustainable way? AI is the perfect example. If we really wanted to take a deep dive into AI, we don't have anyone on our current staff that has the time to do that. So as one of my colleagues has already mentioned, what do we stop doing if we want to invest time in these new initiatives? And then I always have to throw a plug in there for open source software. Libraries have been promoting open access and open educational resources for quite a while now, but I would throw open source software in there as well. If we can help develop tools at a lower cost, then we can use that money elsewhere. And again, getting back to that time on our end, we have one full-time developer on my team, and he splits his time between the FOLIO community and a digital archives community that he's a member of. We've had to give up essentially that staff member to external work, but open source software is just as important to us as open access and OER.
So yes, when I think about things that are top of mind for me right now, as far as the kind of seismic shifts that are coming, AI for sure. It is weirdly awesome and terrible at the same time, and on different days you get different results. I heard somebody quoted a few months ago who said, you're not going to get replaced by AI. You might get replaced by somebody who knows how to use AI, though. And I think that is definitely true. We are trying to carve out time for our developers to play around with AI, to use AI, and we are very interested in open source, piggybacking off what Jeff said there as well. Not only because we think it will be a good for the libraries, but it's also just interesting for our folks to be working on, and engaged and interested employees are the ones who are going to find solutions to problems that you haven't even thought of yet, which is kind of where we're at. I'm at the, I'm not sure what the biggest threat is going to be. Funding, for sure, is always an issue. There's always something legislatively coming down at the national or state level that we're needing to react to and deal with. AI is hanging out there. Our statistics are, not going in the direction that they used to go in, that's for sure. And how do we react to all this? I'm not sure, but I am sure that if I give my staff and my community the trust and the space and the resources that they need, that we will figure out a way to navigate it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because I also think it's one of the external forces, let's say, is the need or the importance of learning to stay relevant. Like we are being bombarded with all these things, all these changes. I mean, everybody is every every decade or every year. There's always something new, but it's having to learn to stay relevant. And what does that mean? And how do you motivate and free up your staff to be able to find that time? Because where is that time? That's hard to come by even on a quiet week, right? So how do we help them do this education to be able to seek and to be interested and curious in the midst of trying to fulfill everything else? So then where do you make those decisions? And so then that discernment of knowing when something's imperative versus nice to have, and then remembering to stay on task. And then I'll add again, I think one of the external forces that we've got to deal with is how do we respond to accreditation bodies? How do we respond to the reportings that, drop the library, like iPads, middle states? How do we interact and deal with those forces that are coming our way?
Yeah, I think you all made some really great points there. And one thing that jumped out at me, because each of you talked about staff in some way. And one thing I was thinking about is having the time and the space to be creative is key. I mean, I love what Lucy said about, the engaged staff find the solutions. But, when we feel so overwhelmed because we've got to get all these things done and all these things done, and I never feel like I can take a break to be creative or to explore. I mean, do any of you have any things that might have worked for you with your staff or even with yourself to carve out that cherished creative time?
So I have a fun example from a prior job. When I was in Florida, for a while, we did something called FedEx Days because it had to be delivered in 24 hours, right? So we would let people sign up in teams to develop something and just give them the space. You get 24 hours to work on this, and everything else can wait. And then the next day, you start at noon one day, next day at noon, you're presenting to your team members. It doesn't have to be complete. It could be nothing more than a proof of concept, but you get some dedicated time to focus on something that's been kind of, kicking around in the back of your head. And we had a few things that actually, became actual, services out of that. But more than that, it was just a way to give folks a little bit of space away from their daily job to spend some time on something that meant something to them.
I love that. I don't know, Stephanie, Jeff, any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
I also think conferences, not online conferences. Sorry, Charleston, but I think giving people the space to go and hear what's happening and have those conversations. I remember I was at Charleston, it was a couple years ago now, and I was trying to figure out a problem in FOLIO or how to do something with a workflow. And I was walking down the street or down at the river or at the ocean or whatever, the harbor. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, that's it. And it was easy, but it took getting out away from the day to day and going, oh, wait, I could think. And so the ability to think outside the box doesn't come when you're working inside the box, right? So you need to be able to get out there and hear and think. And when you don't have that time, and again, you go back to funding. So you go back to staff and you go back to funding. So how do we make that more accessible to our librarians and our staff who we want to be creative?
That makes a lot of sense. What does sustainability mean in the context of your library systems and services, and how do you build toward it? And I'll kick this one off with Stephanie. Sustainability.
Oh gosh, the face. I'm like, oh, I wear my face. Yeah, I think this is it's a good question. It's a meaty question because I think we can go into so many directions with this. And, again, the easy answer is financial, but I think sustainability, obviously, as we've already talked, is so much more than that. And I was thinking back on when we selected our next ILS LSP back in 2021, we were making that decision. I remember my main concern was sustainability. And I think it's a blueprint on how I kind of use sustainability now moving forward, where you have the fiscal, you have to have that conversation, but it's also the management, like the system management. How complex is it? What is it going to take in terms of time and human resources? And then for us, when we were looking at our ILS, LSP was the additional knowledge bases from the outside that we would need to be bringing in. Like, do we really need 3 other knowledge bases that we're managing? And is that really sustainable? And it also talk about efficient workflows with that. And then what are the new solutions and features that are coming out? Because really, when you come down to sustainability or future proofing, we've already had this conversation. It has to be adaptable. It can't take years to come out with something new that is really just lipstick on a pig, and it doesn't really do anything extra for you. And so it needs to be adaptable, resilient. One of my things that we were doing during talking about future proofing or sustainability is actually working with a vendor that gets the importance of streamlining and efficiencies, and even the simple wanting to add an NSIP connection for reshare. And the vendor we were on was going to charge us $3,000 a year for one little NSIP connection that would make our lives so much easier, but that's the vendor being out of touch with what we need and why. Anyway, it was really shocking to me. But I'm not going to go work with a vendor that isn't willing to understand our need to future-proof our library. So I think that was important. And I think building towards all of that, it's not one and done. And I think that's the most important thing, is future proofing is not the status quo. Okay, we have something good, we're going to stick with it and we're going to protect it. It's knowing and accepting your context and understanding that your context will change at times. Knowing what you have and why. I think it's really important to know your collection. And then it's also important to have that ear to the ground, going to the conferences, having the conversations with the vendor. What Jeffrey said is so on point in terms of working with the vendors, hearing what's going on. And then finally, you have to be willing to walk away when something is not when it's working against your future proofing. So finding that way to do all those things is kind of how I think you build towards it.
I think you also have to be willing to embrace a little bit of disruption and some of the pain that can come with disruption. There's, excellent book, The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, and about disruption in organizations, which I would highly recommend to anybody. But there's a classic example of, the horse carriage makers, if they had understood that they were not in the business of making horse carriages, but instead of the business of transportation, that they would perhaps have survived, and then made that jump to being able to provide transportation solutions for the future. So for what does that mean for libraries and for consortia? Are we in the business of, providing MARC records, physical books? Are we in the business of doing something else and providing education and resources? If we embrace the latter definition and are willing to go through the pain of disruption and change, I think we can't help but be successful. If we cling to, well, this is the way we do things, then I think we're in for a lot of pain moving forward.
I would add an internal focus. We've talked a lot about external sources, external companies that can affect what we do, but one of the things that we've seen over time at Grand Valley is we need to be transparent with our colleagues, with our liaison colleagues, with the frontline staff. We have a change coming. This is what we're changing. This is why we're changing it. The reasons behind the decision, but then also being brutally honest. As we transition to one of our systems, it's not important which, we had to approach our acquisitions colleagues and let them know, hey, what you're doing today is going to take longer with this new software. And in a vacuum, you're going to wonder, what in the world are we thinking? Why would we do this? How is this sustainable? But what we're gaining in these other areas we really think will balance it out and it's the right decision to make. And if you're open and honest consistently internally, I feel like right now we're at a place, I'm on a systems and discovery team, that the rest of the library trusts us. When we tell them there's a big change coming, we tell them why. And yeah, there's going to be disruption. I think Lucy mentioned disruption. It's going to happen, but here's the why behind it. And trust me, we'll get there.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. The common theme I keep hearing is the people, and it's so interesting hearing this come up again and again. And it really is something that we value, and adaptability, transparency is key with that. Feeling comfortable with discomfort, I think, is a key in that too. So let's dive into an area where I think a lot of people do start to get uncomfortable, and that's the idea of rethinking metadata practices. We've been working with Mark for longer than I've been alive, and it's really interesting to think about linked data and BIBFRAME and other kinds of ways of moving forward, and to improve discovery or to help with specific collections. How are your specific institutions working through some of these ideas and changes? And I'll kick it off with Stephanie.
Oh, the possibilities. But I'll first say we are such a small fish in this big, gigantic sea. Yet, I know I've listened to the conversation for however long, being at conferences, showing, prototypes of Ferber in action and getting excited because you could see the possibilities with it, right? And how it could work. But it never really came into play within our library system itself. So now with FOLIO, embracing BIBFRAME and being willing to make that adjustment or that change and really come into that and make it something real is exciting to see on the library side. But then, it's not all that pie in the sky anymore, and it hasn't been for a long time, but seeing it in action has been great. And then leveraging the linked data is actually why we added Bibliograph, which I hope it's getting legs. It's something we've been trying to use in our spare time and trying to make time for it because I think it's a really important thing. And it's in the improvement stage. And then as I'm thinking about it's in the improvement stage, I feel like that should always be the response for these things. It should be in the improvement stage because it should never be at a completion, because it should be changing and adapting with what is out there. And with Bibliograph's potential, seeing how it exposes our collections in ways that we hadn't expected, being able to find a Lord of the Rings collection and make a really quick, easy embedded link that we can then put in, and then it can be added to a LibGuide. It can be added to your web page. It could be sent over to a faculty and they can just look at Bibliograph, and reminding people we have these collections that then encourages them to discover new collections, new connections, and grow. I mean, I think Lucy said it really well. Like, that's what we should be in the business of, is that finding and learning and educating, and that serendipity isn't going to happen just at the bookshelf. It can happen everywhere. So get them into and let them discover. And I think that that's been really important. And it's also why we at Cairn, I put a lot of things in that discovery bucket, because we need efficient and reliable ways to get to our community and get our community to our resources. And we don't have the luxury to build a lot from scratch. So I think it's important how we can meet our customers where they are and encourage them to dig deeper, to do that, that finding and that serendipitous research. So you're using linked data to do something that you wouldn't have thought you would be doing with linked data in the, it's supposed to be getting people to your collection, but you're like, wait, we have some holes. Let's get that fixed. And that's been a neat use of Bibliograph that I didn't expect we'd be able to do, because I'm also the acquisitions librarian. So
Yeah, that is really interesting, Stephanie. I hadn't even thought of that myself, but yeah, to find where your gaps are. That makes a lot of sense.
And the
Yeah.
ISBNs are there, so you can pop those in and get those ordered. Anyway.
Yeah. No, that's great. All right. Well, we have one more question to wrap things up. How do you ensure that your future-focused efforts remain grounded in the needs of your users and communities? And I'll kick this one off with Lucy.
Well, it goes back to my earlier answer of like understanding what your true value and values are. You know, what is it that we provide that we can do better than anybody else for the state of Georgia? So how do we gather that information? We do annual surveys, which are sometimes useful, but not often not. We get a lot of responses, but a lot of it's just, you're doing great. We also have a ticketing system. So we do look at, that can be a source. If somebody has taken the time to actually write out a complaint or some words of appreciation, those carry a little extra weight because they really feel passionately about it. Of course, conferences, events, we regularly will not just be attending conferences or presenting at them, but we will have a booth, a table where folks will come by and say, hey, I really like what you're doing with X, Y, and Z. Or conversely, I really don't like this. Can you? And then that's an opportunity to understand, well, what is it that they don't like about it? What is it that they like about it? And maybe make some adjustments. We do regular strategic planning. I know we started off with like everybody hates that strategic planning, and it is a lot of work, but we have done it. We did a big effort. Like we went to them around all of our stakeholder groups around the state and got a lot of feedback early in my tenure here. And we updated that 3 years ago, updated our strategic plan, and we'll be kicking another round off this summer. But the last thing I wanted to throw out there harkens back to what Jeff was saying about being kind of far removed from the user. So we've used user testing products. I will say that it is time consuming to put something in, to do a true usability test with end users, where you put your product in front of them and watch them use it, and watch the hurdles that they hit, and the times that they have to back up, and the things that they think that never would have occurred to you. It is time consuming and it's a lot of work, but it is incredibly valuable and hard to argue with when you see actual users struggling with some aspect of your interface, and you can show that to your development team and say, look, they're just not getting it. We need to do something different.
Thank you all. This was so fun. The time flew by for me. It's so interesting to hear what's going on at each of your institutions. And so thanks again, everybody. Appreciate your time.